Well, I just made a huge mistake. This is a 25-year-old dirt bike that my cousin dropped off in my garage about a month ago, and ever since, I have been on a quest to get this thing back out on the trail. If you've been following along, you know that this has been quite a journey. I've ran into all sorts of different issues, and I've really chased my tail a lot on this build, but I really am passionate about this particular motorcycle because it reminds me of my very first big bike, my very first full-size motorcycle that my dad purchased me back in 2009. I had a 2003 KTM 200 SX. And this bike right here, although just 2 years prior and the MXC version, reminds me a lot of that motorcycle. So it feels good to me to kind of give back, to learn more about these motorcycles, as I am in a position now where I'm really ambitious about learning this stuff. If you haven't seen episode 1 or episode 2, I'll catch you up to speed really fast. This bike showed up to my garage not running. I was able to get the bike started, and since then have troubleshooted all sorts of different components. The biggest issue I ran into was the bike just didn't want to get on the power band. In the last episode, we were finally able to solve that and took it out on its first trail ride. The bike is running. It's running much better than it has. Now is the time to start addressing all of the little different details on this bike that are not functioning properly. I sat down, made a big old list of all of the different items that I want to address on this motorcycle to get it back into condition where it's really reliable and a fun trail bike. In this episode, I'm going to try and tackle that entire list. Who knows, maybe this turns into a 4 or 5 part series. However, I'm pretty ambitious that we can get all that stuff. Huge shout out to Rocky Mountain ATVMC, who is sponsoring this video. They were generous enough to send me a whole box of parts to get this bike back up on its feet. I have new brake pads, new gaskets, new levers, all sorts of fun things to get this bike back into good shape. If you guys want to support Ride with the Knights, click the link in the description below, shop all of your favorite Rocky Mountain parts. You can even head over to ridewiththeknights.com and click on Shop Rocky Mountain ATVMC. That will trigger our link as well. It helps support us out, helps us continue to make these videos. I have an absolute blast doing this, and I want to keep doing it and sharing with you my passion for motorcycles. Thank you guys so much for the support. Let's jump into some of these repairs. So if you've watched episode 2, you saw that on our test ride, the rear wheel slipped, and it was caused because there was a gap between the adjuster bolt and the adjuster block on the axle. And if you ever do this, and you go riding, as soon as you get a high load or high tension on your chain, it's gonna slide forward, no matter what. That's exactly what happened. It kind of cockeyed the rear wheel. Luckily, we didn't have the chain bind up. It could cause all sorts of different issues. But that's what happens when you have an adjuster bolt on the rear axle that is seized, is it doesn't give you the ability to adjust it. So that's the first thing I tried to do on this bike, was fix that. Now, with fasteners that are seized, it's always a challenge. A couple different techniques are to try and hit it with some heat, try and get penetration oil. I had some PB Blaster in here, so that's exactly what I did. But most of the time when you're trying to hit a fastener, you don't have the ability to hit the sort of unexposed threads that are deeper inside the metal, depending on where the fastener is located on a motorcycle or wherever you're working on. But in this case, on a swing arm, it's kind of a unique part. And I had heard a trick from a friend where you can actually try to drill a very tiny hole, just big enough to insert the straw of an aerosol spray into the side of the swing arm. Now, to try and do this, the goal is to try and drill in an area where you're going to actually hit the bolt or punch through the internal cavity of the swing arm and be able to hit the backside of the bolt with penetration oil. Now, this is definitely something I probably wouldn't recommend doing for most people unless you're really desperate. But if you have a bolt that sees this bad in a swing arm, chances are you're probably going to be removing some metal anyways. You don't want to break it off, then drill out the whole thing. That's kind of the alternative. So drilling a tiny little pilot hole was my solution. That was my attempt. So that's the first thing I tried to do, was drill a little bit of a hole on the side. I did this first with the wheel on the bike, hit it with some PB Blaster, and then I tried to use some duct tape. Anyways, I saw that trick from Jay Clark and really thought that was cool. He recommends doing it off the bike. I tried it first with it on the bike, but anyways, I eventually conceded to the fact that I was probably going to have to remove the swing arm. It was just going to give me more room to work and just better visibility, see where I'm drilling. So I went ahead, removed the swing arm entirely from the motorcycle, put it in my vise, and that way I was able to get a much clearer view of where I was drilling and where I was putting the tape on there. So I kind of made a second attempt. I was able to drill 2 really small holes, and I think I did a pretty good job. One of the holes, my goal was to get behind the bolt. The other one, I was trying to actually drill and hit the bolt. So I'm drilling through the swing arm and trying to hit the bolt. That way you have like a direct little port to get penetration oil in the backside. I did that. I created a little dam reservoir with some tape, filled that sucker up with penetration oil, left it overnight, came back the next day, hit it with some heat, and cracked that thing loose. So that was a total win. Now that is a freaking win right there, baby. So I was able to successfully repair the swing arm, the axle adjuster bolt that was in there. But as I took apart the rear wheel, I noticed a different issue. It's just always a side quest. Everything you do is a side quest. You solve one thing and then you just open up another thing. But I noticed a pretty big issue. One of the wheel bearings on the rear wheel, the sprocket side wheel bearing, is completely annihilated, totally gone. And the last time this bike was ridden was on that test ride in the mountains where we got caught in the hailstorm and everything. And I remember starting to feel and hear a kind of recurring clicking or something in the bike. I was getting some feedback that wasn't quite normal. I did a little bit of inspection later in that day, but honestly, I was so concerned about staying alive and keeping my hands warm that entire, whatever it was, 20 mile road ride back, these bearings were just getting shredded on that road. And so it's done some pretty significant damage to the hub, but I think that it's salvageable. I'm going to try and save it. The reason I think that it's salvageable, I just got the second opinion from my buddy Eric, but the everything is gone from the bearing except for the outer race. The outer race is still intact. So and about 90%, well, pretty much the entire outer race is still intact. So that's good news, because that area where the bearing is going to make contact with the hub is about the only area that appears to not have received any gouging or damage. Where the seal sits on the outside is pretty torn up. I'm going to try and just gently sand it and kind of clean out some of the debris and see if I can press in these new wheel bearings. If I can get those pressed in correctly, get that seal on the outside, I may have to touch it up with a little bit of silicone just to keep that seal in place. But these wheels are worth trying to save. These gold wheels are pretty cool. So let's get to work. got the bearings out of the wheel. This one was the damaged bearing. This was just the outer race right here, and it's kind of hard to see, but if you look inside, there's a lot of damage in there, but the only area that is safe and that has been protected was the surface of the hub that was sitting behind where this outer race of that bearing was pressed in. So that's good news, because that's actually the only part of the surface of the hub that we still need in contact. So I'm just going to proceed forward. Just finished up working on the wheel. I'm kind of at a stopping point right now. I was able to clean up the hub pretty good. The bearing that was on the rotor side was still completely intact, and I was able to remove that bearing. The bearing on the sprocket side was smoked, but the outer race was still in there, which was good news, because that surface where that bearing sits against the hub was still intact and in pretty good shape. So where the seal sits outside of that is a little kind of banged up, but I was able to kind of smooth that out, treat that surface. So it might need a little bit of help with some silicone, but I think that that should be just fine. So the other piece that got significantly damaged is this wheel spacer. This sits inside the hub. It controls the spacing between the bearings, and it also helps when you tighten down your axle that you're not applying a lot of pressure laterally on the bearings. This kind of makes up that gap. You can see all these grooves in it where metal has scraped around this. So this is not usable anymore. It's cracked on the end right here. It's in rough shape. So I have a new one of these on order. I have a couple other parts. I have a new axle adjuster bolt. We were able to fix that. Super cool. So pretty happy with that. But what I didn't know is the kit that I bought that is the axle adjuster bolt repair kit. I assumed that when you press in, I didn't actually end up using that. I was able to get the extract the bolt out and salvage the original threads. So I was pretty stoked about that. I thought that the repair kit bolt was going to be the same thread pitch and width and bolt size as the OEM one, but it's not, which is kind of surprising, because to use that kit, you're supposed to drill out the axle threads, adjuster bolt threads, tap in, press fit in a new insert, not necessarily a helicoil, but a new insert with threads. I figured you drill it out, step up, press in the insert, step back down. That's not the case. It's a different thread size. So I ordered a new one of those, pretty cheap part. I got all these from Rocky Mountain. So they should be coming in the next few days. In the meantime, we have some other work to do on this bike. So pretty happy with solving those two problems. Looking at our list here, we've got a whole bunch of cool things to work on. Most of these items on this list are sort of like chassis kind of related, or control components, like just little things like rebuilding the brake calipers, putting on new brake pads, the wheel bearings, the clutch levers, kind of cleaning up the exhaust, kind of external things. And there is one item on this list that is right there: repair crank seals. That one's a big one. And doing any of these other things without really addressing that feels kind of doing things in the wrong order. That's a big one. That's going to require a lot more work. There's one other one on here: repair the Kickstarter. I need to kind of take that apart. That's going to be in the process of taking the engine apart. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take apart the engine. So we need to get this sucker out of the bike. I don't know if I'm going to break this up into its own episode or not, so whenever you're watching this, initiate teardown sequence. Let's go. Engine is out of the frame and on the bench. It's pretty quick, not too bad. Not very many electrical things to disconnect other than the spark plug and the stator. So once I got that out, then it's just getting it out of there, and it's not being a 200 size cylinder. There's not too much there, so pretty easy to get it out, just under an hour. So next challenge is to get this thing cleaned up good enough to work on it. It's got a fair amount of dirt and grime and grease, especially on the underside. So I'm gonna plug up some of the entries and some of the orifices and pressure wash this thing. Look at the bottom of that thing. It's all dirty. Scrub it good. With the engine all cleaned up, it was time to get it ready for disassembly. This was a great opportunity for me to bust out my Tusk motorcycle engine stand. I've used this a couple times in the past, but this is just like the perfect opportunity to use this. You have the whole engine out of the bike. It works really well, despite even draining the oil and the coolant. It just seems like no matter what you do on a dirt bike, there's still oil hiding in weird cavities in the engine. So if you tip it, then you just make a huge mess. So having the catch pan makes a huge difference. Being able to rotate the engine is awesome. I realized the whole point of taking this engine apart was to change the crank seals. And I realized as I was starting to take this apart that I probably wasn't going to have to split the cases the way that the seals are pressed in. And anyways, I ended up just kind of going through with that. I wanted to see the bottom end with my own eyes. I wanted to see the crank bearings and inspect the quality, just with all the weird behavior of this bike. I just wanted to not leave any stones unturned. So I went ahead and followed through with that. And yeah, I made a big old, just a super embarrassing mistake that you're about to watch here. Well, I just made a huge mistake working on this engine, and it's very embarrassing of me to admit it. As I was taking apart this engine, I got all the way down to the primary drive, and I was just working away, not really thinking anything of it, and I was struggling to get the primary drive gear off, and I took some steps to try and get it off. I was using a clutch holder tool. I even jammed some coins in between the gears. And all the while, I was going the wrong direction on the nut. The crank is reverse threaded. It's a left-handed thread. So I was trying to move the bolt towards the left in a standard situation. That's how you get a fastener off. But on the crank, it's reverse threaded. As the crank moves in that direction, it would unthread itself. So, yeah. When I was trying to use a breaker bar. I tried to use an impact, and then I tried a breaker bar, and it slipped so much so. Well, it slipped, and the piston was in a pretty precarious spot up here on the top of the crank cases, and it actually chipped the bottom skirt of the piston. So not only was I just extremely embarrassed by my lack of ability to recall that nut is different, but I also damaged the piston in the process. So I can't even really begin to describe how embarrassing that is. Honestly, for me, it's kind of it's a unique experience, and I've been thinking about it since it happened. And normally things don't bother me too much. I've been making content for a long time, and you know, I've kind of gotten over the process of sharing my experience online and everything, and it doesn't bother me. But I was really embarrassed by this one. I'll admit, I was like, man. But I had to give myself some credit. I mean, a lot of the motorcycle experience I do have is riding. I do have a lot of experience working on motorcycles, but I don't necessarily, if I count how many times I've actually taken a crank apart, it's not very many. It's definitely less than 10. It might even be less than 5. I really actually haven't done that a ton. So when I think about how many times I've actually done this process, it's not very many. But um, doing the type of work that I'm doing on here, I mean, it's still a really silly and embarrassing mistake to make, to not remember that. And so it definitely, as soon as I remembered that, I was just like, oh my gosh, like holy smokes, did I really just do that? But I will say this. I have been making content for a long time, and it's taken me every year that goes by, I learn a little bit more about myself, a little bit more about what direction I want to go, what's interesting to me, what my passion is. And I will say that something really refreshing about this whole process and this whole, this situation I find myself in right now with, making this embarrassing mistake is for a lot of years I've made content, I've made videos, and a lot of my early content early on growing this YouTube channel, even up until the last year or so, a lot of it has been focused on riding instruction, a lot of off-road riding instruction. And I will say that I kind of got not necessarily burned out from that. I do really enjoy sharing things that help other off-road riders, but there was a part of that whole process for me that was just not very genuine and true to myself, meaning that I struggled every time I went to go make a video because it felt like I always was trying to, or being required to sort of hold this presence, hold this, this figure, this identity that I'm just this professional dirt bike rider and that I have the answers to everything. And that, every time I turn the camera on to produce a piece of content or share something with you, I, I have to be the expert. And I didn't like that. I don't like being the expert, to be honest. I'm not an expert in a lot of ways. There are things that I am an expert at. I've ridden dirt bikes and raced enduro races and all these things, and I've, honed a lot of awesome skills in that area. And so I'm happy to share all those things. But it gets exhausting and fatiguing on my energy when I have to always hold that identity of being an expert. So this is the complete opposite of that. Messing up something so, that should be so common for a mechanic. It's refreshing for me because now, even though it's embarrassing, it's even though it's really embarrassing and painful to admit it, it's genuine and it's real and it's really who I am. So there's nothing about that feels, it's true emotion in that it feels embarrassing, but it feels refreshing to me in the sense that that's truly who I am. That's me. And so I can honestly share that with you. And I hope that that resonates with you because whether it's a left-handed thread or anything else in life, we've all done really silly and dumb things. So that's what I look forward to with this type of content. And that's a big goal of mine. That's really a really important part of whether it's mechanic videos, just riding videos, or anything else that I share on YouTube or with my friends or family, is just making sure that I stay true to that and being comfortable sharing who I really am and not getting caught up in. It's really easy to just accidentally start kind of following this path where a couple months or years down the road, you've built something that is not necessarily completely true to who you are. So, yeah, that's kind of hopefully a little bit of a lesson that I can learn out of this whole thing, on top of the very valuable and critical lesson of remembering the direction of threads on a crankshaft. So let's get back to the video. Let's get back to the build. You know what's funny is after I remembered that that was the reverse thread, I came right over here with my impact, and I didn't even have to use any gear jammer tool or anything. I just was able to hold the piston and zip it right off. So that's super cool. And also, I think this is a great time to shout out, as I do many times in these videos, Rocky Mountain ATVMC, because I was really upset when I damaged that piston, but I ordered a piston at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and at 11 a.m. the next day, it was on my doorstep. That doesn't happen all the time. Most of the time, it's 2-day shipping for me. I do live in Utah, so I'm a little bit closer to their warehouse, but I got lucky on that one. So we do have all the parts. Let's jump back into this build, continue splitting the cases on this engine, and be careful not to make any more silly mistakes like that, but let's break it down.